And there's kind of a folk mythology out there with purists who want to dry age commando, that they feel dry aging in the UMAY bag or the DryAgePro bag is less dramatic a flavor. The reality is the results in that first study showed that there's very little perceptible difference in flavor panel.
Welcome to MeatsPad, a platform dedicated to sharing breakthrough knowledge that is accessible to the meats industry. On each episode, we will hear from meat specialists and professionals to talk about numerous topics in meat science. This podcast is brought to you by the U.S. Meat Export Federation, the National Provisioner, UltraSource, the new standard for innovation,
IFA, Meat Processing Power.
Kerry's food protection and preservative business keeps food safe and extends shelf life through clean label and conventional preservative solutions. Viscofan is a global leader and innovative partner in the food industry who provides solutions for the casing market.
Hello, meat folks. Welcome back to the MeatsPad podcast. Today, we're very excited again to be back on this podcast. This is your podcast. We get a lot of questions from small meat processors, medium-sized meat processors. I'm excited to kick this off. Dr. Bass, how are you today?
I'm excited as usual, Francisco. We have, this is almost turning into the Dry Age podcast because it keeps coming back to those discussions, and it's interesting the direction we're going to go today. A lot of folks out there know that I do a lot of dry age research in kind of the more traditional sense, but it's time we investigate a little bit a modern take on dry aging, and that's why we have Thea and Armando from UMAY Dry, and they're joining us today to talk about their product, the DryAgePro. Welcome.
Thanks. Amando is actually a Japanese name. It's not Spanish.
Oh, Amando, not Armando.
That's always a fun one for sure. It's okay. When people read it, I get Amanda all the time as well. So,
my
Spanish
gosh.
or female.
This is why we should have spelled it out everything beforehand. Oh my goodness, we would have corrected a lot of.
No worries, Phil.
So, well,
He's
hey,
yeah.
Well, and we do that intentionally just to lighten the mood a little bit.
Absolutely,
obviously, right? So, well, and of course, I mean, naturally, I was able to roll my R when I said Armando, but
I was very impressed.
I had no need to do that, obviously. Back to the subject at hand. Tell us a little bit about the DryAgePro bags.
Okay. DryAgePro is the B2B brand of UMAY Dry. And the whole technology, the membrane bag technology, we started playing with in about 2005, had it pretty much validated in 2007. We took the research out and tried to convince processors that, hey, here's a way to dry age and you don't need to make any significant capital investment. And a whole bunch of the R&D people were fascinated by it. They're like, oh, awesome, dry aging, bigger margins and everything, and something to play with, right? They loved it. When it came to actually selling it to the higher ups in the company or the sales team, they're like, wait a minute, we have to hold this meat on the shelf for how long? And a lot of the operations didn't want to hold on to the money that long to have it increase in value. So as a consequence, the original membrane bag kickoff in 2007 was for processors. We had some uptake, but not enough to really justify a business. So we launched a website as a way to, give us more presence and a way for people to find us. And our web designer said, why don't you put some PayPal buttons on here? And I'm like, why? It's 2008, I think, at that point. And he's like, well, I think the product is cool. Maybe other people at home will. And sure enough, we had a sale in like a week to 10 days. And we had no packaging, no instructions, certainly no videos or anything. But the consumer brand took off. And so the consumer brand, we ended up naming UMAY Dry, which UMAY in, no connection with Japan, but UMAY in Japanese means either skillful or tasty. And so rhymes with dry, sounds pretty good. And then in 2013, we kind of backed up and said, you know what? We really need to have a proper presence for the commercial users as well. So we developed a separate DryAgePro brand and website, and got some better, some scientists to talk about the product. So that's where it started.
We were talking earlier about how this started, and a long time before I started my master's and PhD in K-State, 2005, you were telling us that this started in a research project with Dr. Hun as just starting how to just evaluate or validate these bags. Can you tell us a little bit about this story and the background of how this started?
Yeah, the product is a little bit like Post-it glue. Post-it glue was an accident, and then they found a use for it. This material wasn't exactly an accident, but it was invented without really an application. And so the manufacturer that we work with in Europe had this bag, and he's like, can we use it for medical purposes? Can we use it for food purposes? Can you smoke in it? And we heard about it at a meat conference, knowing this vendor for other products that they make. And they were like, do you have any ideas? And so we're like, well, maturing beef is something they do in England. Dry aging, it's kind of dying out in the US at that point, right? But maybe people would be interested. And so we did a little research. We located Dr. Hunt, who was creating the state-of-the-art, open air dry aging techniques, technology. And we just asked him, would you be willing to test this bag and see how the results compared to open air dry aging? And he was extremely skeptical, but he was very open to, exploration. That's what a scientist does. And so he and some of his grad students took it on, and they were amazed that you could put meat in this seeming plastic bag and have it dry at the same rate as open age without cross-contamination, without a high buildup of anaerobic bacteria inside the bag, and with significantly less trim loss. And you don't need a drying room. You just need, a humidity controlled, consistent temperature area. So that's where it started.
So the technology, just for the listeners out there, it looks like a plastic bag, and I want you to elaborate on this a little bit too. But so it looks like a plastic bag, a traditional vacuum package type bag, but it is more of a membrane that as you've mentioned allows for moisture to pass across. Is that right?
Yeah. Do you want to describe how it differs?
Yeah. So
feeling wise,
it's a little unique. I think the easiest way that I find to explain it to people is, are you familiar with a food saver bag? And they say yes. And I say, well, this is a bit like that, except it's not thick plastic. It feels a little bit thinner. You can definitely feel the difference between the two. There's a little more texture and nuance to it. And the key part to really bring across to people is that it's not a vacuum seal bag, right? You can put it in a vacuum sealer and it'll seal in a vacuum sealer, or you can immerse it into water and you can do the kind of Archimedes method to take the air out, right? But you just need that firm kind of grip onto the meat at first, and then you let the myoglobin and everything else, the kind of meaty juice on the outside of the meat, bond a little bit, and then it just starts to dry. And so the oxygen exchange between the two prevents certain things like botulism from growing, right? You don't want that. So you have to really stress that it's not a vacuum sealed bag for HACCP purposes and such. And it's just so dang easy to use. I mean, I come from a background of being a professional chef, right? And I mean, I worked in really nice kitchens that had our own dedicated walk-in cooler just for dry aging, right? And it was the old-fashioned way, right? Where you have to take everything out a couple times a year to bleach the walls kind of thing because it got stanky. But with the dry aging bag, it's just, with the UMAY DRY, it's just so much easier. And it's nice to be able to do it in the same walk-in for smaller applications like a restaurant, right? It's nice to be able to do the same walk-in with something else without it picking up smells or scents or cardboard or anything else like that. So convenience.
So it's, yeah. So, okay. So there's definitely the convenience aspect of it. You don't necessarily have to have a dedicated dry aging room, which is definitely how a lot of the commercial operators will be using or creating dry age product in a more traditional sense. And definitely creates a very consistent product, as you mentioned. What are some of the flavor notes that folks would expect from this dry aging application?
The original study with this material, first of all, they went on the assumption that most people have, is that it's a plastic bag, so it provides a barrier. It provides a barrier, but it does not provide either a moisture barrier or an oxygen barrier. So you will get, the enzymes have the oxygen that they need to break down the muscle fibers. The fat in the meat will oxidize, so you'll get those nutty flavors that you want. Obviously, it's losing moisture. It's dry aging at the same rate as open air. So you're getting that intensification of the beef flavor. So the very first study that was published in Meat Science in 2006 had a flavor panel. And part of the reason I believe they designed this study to have that gauge done is because they wanted to show that, obviously in a bag, it's not going to develop a lot of flavor. And there's kind of a folk mythology out there with purists who want to dry age commando, that they feel dry aging in the UMAY bag or the DryAgePro bag is less dramatic a flavor. The reality is the results in that first study showed that there's very little perceptible difference in flavor panel. I mean, unless you've dry aged something in a super funky open air environment where it's getting a lot of like blue cheese and like the old timers would say, the burp, like the flavor that you get the next day kind of thing. Basically, a good modern dry aging open air environment is going to develop exactly the same flavors as UMAY Dry or vice versa. What
are some of the other meat products that can be dry aged using DryAgePro bags?
Well, one of the good things that we've done with the product throughout the last decade is that we've evolved applications for doing whole muscle charcuterie, so cured whole muscle meat. So you do the traditional Italian kinds of things. And also we've developed methods of doing fermented dry sausage the traditional way. So you're not applying heat, you're not applying citric acid to give you the tartness. You're actually fermenting the meat for up to 72 hours and then drying it in a refrigerated environment, as is always the case with UMAY Dry. So yeah, we support customers, both commercial customers and individuals who want to do charcuterie and salumi, and we provide everything that they need, except the meat.
The mission of USMEF is to increase the value and profitability of the U.S. beef, pork, and lamb industries by enhancing demand for their products in export markets through a dynamic partnership of all stakeholders. Simply put, USMEF is putting U.S. meat on the world's table.
Can you give us some examples of folks in the industry? I know we were talking a couple of weeks ago, and we talk about some folks in Korea that are using these bags for a certain application. Could you just maybe our listenership that are listening to this podcast can just get a better perspective of what are other applications and the use of these bags?
Yeah. Well, the way that the DryAgePro application evolved was that we started out going to large meat processors, meat suppliers. And we found, as I said, they do not want to hold on to the money any longer than necessary. So where we found a much stronger niche was with restaurant suppliers. And as Amando mentioned, restaurants. But a really nice niche we found in the US, Canada, and Australia is often the restaurant suppliers who want to be able to supply a consistent premium product that's already been processed into steaks for the end user. Some chefs want to do it in-house, but it does require management. So yeah, the very first area of success for us commercially was restaurant suppliers. It has proven to be very beneficial for catering operations, especially large scale catering operations that want to have a high value offering. And in Australia, actually, they've had more success with dry aging larger volumes and then shipping it out to various Asian countries because they supply a lot of meat frozen. So they'll actually do the dry aging, trim it, because that's when you're going to get the least trim losses if you trim it immediately after removing the UMAY DRY membrane. So it's nice and hard and waxy. So you'll get your minimum trim loss at that point, and then they vacuum seal the dry aged meat as trimmed subprimals and ship it out to, throughout Asia. So that's sort of the bigger market. The South Korean market is a newer market for us, but it kind of follows the pattern of a larger sort of visionary meat supplier having an idea about how they can offer something that would otherwise require a significant capital investment to embark upon.
That's kind of leading to the next question. We talk about the vacuum seal misconception that some folks have used the bag and vacuum sealer, that you don't have to necessarily do that. Can you please tell us about this new, I would say, launch of this Ziploc type bag? So I don't know, I think this will solve some of these issues, or kind of understand the whole idea of these bags as not vacuum seal bags.
Yeah, well, kind of to return to your question earlier, Phil, that Amanda was answering, what's the difference between this material and a plastic bag or a vacuum bag?
Right. Well, and my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there is kind of a proprietary coating on the inside. Is that right? So it can interact? No, it doesn't. So it just connects to the natural protein on the surface of the meat.
Like I said, there's a lot of folk stuff out there about it has a coating, or it's the vacuum seal, the spacer, the vacuum adapter strip that does the magic.
Yes.
Or there's some people who think it has a one-way valve. No, I mean, I think we've come to understand that there are developing plastics which are highly moisture permeable, right? So this bag is a combination of polymers. It is obviously a proprietary combination, just as all plastics are, right? And this particular combination enables moisture to be released through the bag, not through a mechanical means, but through a chemical means, right? So there are plastics in there that provide stability, and there are plastics in there that allow for permeability. So when we say moisture permeable, it can go both ways. I mean, it's simple osmosis. If you fill that or open that bag or fill the bag with air and dip it in water, eventually moisture is going to permeate inside the bag, and you'll pull it out and you can pour water out of it. If you put a wet paper towel into the bag and seal it up, the paper towel will be dry in a couple of days. It's a simple, genuine membrane in that regard. Where we've run into problems, which is what Francisco has alluded to, is that as long as you tell people to use a vacuum sealer to apply it, which was really only done so that you can easily draw the air out and bring it into best contact with that myoglobin coating on the meat, right? But when you employ that piece of equipment, people immediately equate it with, the whole Bible of concern about anaerobic packaging, right? Oxygen barrier bags and anaerobic bacterial growth, and it just sends off alarms everywhere. The fact is, this material has proven to have very little anaerobic bacterial growth, and the overall bacterial load on the meat of aerobic and anaerobic after dry aging in the bag versus open air is less, right? So what we've begun to do is to say, just eliminate the vacuum sealer. The material does not seal like a vacuum bag. It doesn't need to seal like a vacuum bag. Air pockets pose no risk whatsoever. The critical thing is that you have an untouched, untrimmed, boneless subprimal steak cut. If you have a nice, gooey piece of meat and you slide it into this bag and you zip tie it off after just pressing it into good contact, you're good. If you've got, only 75 to 80% of the meat in contact with that membrane, you're good to go. And as the meat shrinks, especially with the charcuterie and the salumi applications, as the meat shrinks, the bag is not like a natural casing. It doesn't shrink together with the meat. It will just release. And so you get more air pockets inside. But as long as you have it in a, well-controlled, humidity controlled environment with a consistent 34 to 38 degree temperature, 1 to 4 degree Celsius temperature range, you're not going to have any problems.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate the, this is the funny thing about our business. We're storytellers, obviously, and we not just Francisco and I. It's the whole meat business, and the story of the coatings and the necessity of having to have a vacuum package. I mean, we see these bags. I've seen them, and they look very much like a traditional vacuum packaging bag, but clearly they're not. And I really appreciate you kind of clearing that up for us and walking the folks through the proper use of these bags and the variety of uses of them. I do like the part and the message that you're portraying of the yield will likely be improved over traditional dry aging, and you won't have quite as much to trim away later on. And so definitely some great opportunities with this technology.
Jill, if I could add, in my first couple of years of testing the product in a lot of different meat facilities, the anecdotes that I would often hear from the people who work on the floor are, first of all, this bag is weak because it's a single layer flexible membrane, right? They're like, the bag is weak. Like, yeah, it's a membrane. It's not a vacuum bag. It sure isn't a cryovac, bone bag, right?
Right.
So that was the first thing. The second thing was when you get those old timers who are trim and dry age and they've been doing it for years and they got their, chain metal glove and all this stuff, you throw a subprimal piece of meat that's been dry aged in UMAY DRY in front of them and they're like, wow, this is really easy to trim. The bark still has this flexibility. And it basically, like I described about being like wax, it basically chips off like wax. And it's super easy for them to trim. So a lot less trim loss.
Yeah, this is a lot of great information. I think the misconceptions out there that we have seen and that we observed with meat processors and also consumers definitely will help just to get to know the bags, what they are, some of the products that could be used, and yeah. So I'm running out of questions. Do you have something else to add, Dr. Bass?
Well, I just really appreciate Thea and Amando for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about your background, if you don't mind. We like to ask that of our guests. Tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get here?
So we're a family business.
Okay.
My professional background was I was a professor of intercultural communication, so cultural anthropology. I love learning new things. And I got tired of teaching. And I just happened to have a friend from college who was very interested, had a million different business ideas, but had a 9-to-5 job that he really put his time and effort into. And I was so eager to get out of teaching that I decided to start doing the footwork for the product. And so I started going into, meat plants and running tests. And for me, it was just another culture to learn. And so that's how I got into it. And then started, like I said, building the company up the more I was learning. More recently, just prior to the pandemic, my son, Amando, left the culinary field. And as he alluded, he was in very high-end restaurants that had their own in-house butchers and dry aging programs. And, similar to me, he wanted to change. So I thought, well, you could try this out if it's interesting to you. And then the pandemic hit and he's become far more involved in the company because.
Well, in all fairness, I've been kind of a part of the company for a long time. Like when I was younger, we would fold bags for kids at the kitchen table, that kind of thing. And I helped set up the QuickBooks when we first established as a business. And
yeah, when he was in high school. Yeah. So he's been around it for quite a while.
it was an interesting educational time for me.
Well, and this is a great example of how something good does come out of these troubling and challenging times, is that it kind of forces you to recalibrate and look at a different career paths, different opportunities that life can bring to us. And
I think it's
MeatsPad is a great example of it.
I think it's important to note that UMAY DRY started in 2007, which not a great time to start a business, and we just grew organically. And now with the pandemic and starting a second generation, it's time to really differentiate and give the commercial part of the business a lot more love and care. So that's why we started working with you guys and trying to get the word out about what it's about. Mm-hmm. Time for the next generation, the next level. And there's more dry aging bags out now, so it's not hard to explain to people, okay, we proved that this works. Now you have kind of your pick of whose bag you want to go with, right?
Plus, we get to say that really cool part where we brought this to market, It just makes us feel all warm and fuzzy inside.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
The original dry aging bag.
Awesome. No, I think this is great. I think there's a lot of things that, again, that were misconceptions for many folks, and I believe that this episode will bring and clarify all those questions. Thank you a lot for joining us today. I appreciate your time and support, and we'll hopefully in this year, 2022, will be a great year for everyone, and so thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Francisco. We appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, guys.